Welcome to the
New York City.
Pinstripe Territory. Just when they thought I was out, they pull me back in.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. My guest today is longtime ESPN baseball reporter Buster Olney. How you doing, Buster?
I'm doing great. We're coming down the stretch. It feels like every day somebody spraying champagne. It's one of the most fun times of the year.
So I wanted, before we get started, to introduce my audience to my favorite baseball book, The Last Night of the Yankees Dynasty by Buster Olney. Anything come to mind when you think about this book?
Oh man, well, first off, it's written around Game 7 of the 2001 World Series. People will always ask me, what was the coolest thing you got to cover in Major League Baseball? And I always say it's something that I hope we never see again, because of the context that just after 9/11, but that 2001 World Series was absolutely incredible. It was the one time that I've seen where you actually had an entire nation rooting for the Yankees.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing for me is I just love covering that group of players. That group of guys on that team, they love baseball. They were really great about sharing, and it was a lot of fun to write that book. It was a lot of fun to write about those players.
Yeah, so for the people who haven't read it, I strongly recommend it. I compare it to a Quentin Tarantino movie because it's kind of told out of order. You go through the game, and as you're going through the game, you kind of tell the story of how all these different players, their journeys to get to that spot. So it's a really, really great read. I read it every winter. But let's talk a little bit about current times, about the 2024 Yankees. I've been thinking about how they've improved a lot from last year, and not a lot of people expected them to, win the division. The Orioles were pretty much everybody's favorite. Do you think that they've done enough to where Aaron Boone will at least have his option picked up, if not get an extension?
So I'm going to sound like I'm hedging, but I'm really not. I think they absolutely could. But that bullpen and as it's constructed now, as we head into the postseason, it's a total mystery how it's going to do in October. When they made the decision to make a change at closer, and the word that Aaron Boone used was creative going forward, what that guaranteed is whatever they decide to go with down the stretch into October, it's an experiment. And you know what? The experiment may work out. Those guys, Weaver might be terrific. Hanley, he could do great. But these guys are going to be in situations they've never seen before. There's a lot about the team you absolutely love. Nobody can match them when you're talking about having Judge and Soto batting back to back, but you just don't know how that bullpen's going to do. So if you told me, and I before the season started, I picked the Phillies to play the Yankees in the World Series, and if you told me that played out, it was right that the Yankees got to the World Series, it wouldn't be a shocker to me. It also wouldn't be a shocker to me if they got knocked out in the first round. I just don't know how the bullpen's going to react once you put the pressure on it.
And we got some news this morning. You and I were talking before we hit record. Nestor Cortez getting an MRI on his elbow today. He's been so valuable. 15 2/3 innings, 1 earned run over his last several appearances. How concerned should the Yankees be about losing Nestor?
Well, first off, when I saw that, I said, and my initial thought was, man, that he was a guy who, this about Nestor, in the postseason, he's not going to be afraid. Like, he loves the stage. He loves the spotlight. We saw it, in the All-Star game where he's wearing a microphone, something other players wouldn't be comfortable doing. And it really said a lot about his personality. Right. So for this to pop up this late in the season, it's a concern. At the very least, you would assume it's tied to some sort of discomfort. They're going to have to rest him. And then when he comes back and pitches, how effective will he be? You hope that it's just one minor blip and that he's able to come back. And I do think he potentially is going to be a weapon for them out of the bullpen as a left-hander in a big spot because he's going to respond, I think, positively when he gets into those moments in October.
And the Yankees have been one of the more healthy teams, down the stretch here.
Yep.
It's nice that you can have Marcus Stroman at least step in. I don't know if he'll get a playoff start, but at least, he can take a start here down the stretch where you don't have to kill the bullpen. Any thoughts on the state of the rotation as it compares to the other teams in the American League as we head into the postseason?
Well, first off, to me, one of the big questions is, in the American League playoffs, which teams are the most complete teams? And for me, as the AL playoff starts, the Astros are the most complete team. When you look at, the fact that Valdez has rediscovered his sinker, Hunter Brown has stepped in. My guess is Justin Verlander probably is not going to be part of the Astros rotation because he hasn't pitched well. But Yusei Kikuchi has been tremendous since they got him from the Toronto Blue Jays. So for me, the Astros are probably the most dangerous team in the field. But all these teams, we saw last year with what happened with the Rangers and the Diamondbacks. These are teams at the bottom of the seedings, and they found their way into the championship round. I can't remember a time since I've been covering baseball where I felt like it was more wide open. So their concerns about either the rotation, which Garrett Cole you're going to get. The great Garrett Cole or somebody who struggles, it seems like, and that you'll remember that playoff game he had against the Red Sox in Fenway Park. You just, you don't know, but I think that the whole field is like that. You don't know how some of these guys are going to respond.
A lot of parity this year. It should make for an interesting postseason, for entertainment value at least. Let's talk a little bit about the Martian. The Yankees gave him $5.1 million as a 16-year-old. They really haven't had a lot of international amateurs turn into stars in recent years, which is something that I know a lot of fans, expect them to do. We look at, they signed Bernie Williams and Alfonso Soriano, all these guys of days past, and they really haven't done that much recently. What are the early returns saying, for the people who are around the team, baseball insiders? What do these guys think about the Martian? And do you think he's done enough to supplant Verdugo in the postseason? Last night, Verdugo obviously got the start in left field. I felt like that was one of those things where the Yankees are trying to clinch. Let's put the guy out there who's been the biggest part of the team all year long. But now, all bets are off. I think a lot of fans want to see the Martian out there in left field. Any thoughts on Jasson Dominguez?
Yeah, I think it's going to come down to quite simply who's the hottest player in the moment. I think that's what you and I have seen through the years is that when you get to the biggest games of the year, the managers, like the history doesn't matter as much. And so Alex Verdugo might have been one of the regulars during the course of the year. But if they feel like that in a given day that Dominguez is going to give him a better chance, then he's going to play. And I think that's what's going to happen. Because, and I was thinking back to different examples of this. I remember back in that 98 team, and I wrote about it in the thing, Shane Spencer had that amazing finish at the end of the year. You wouldn't have guessed in the middle of August that he would have been a guy who would have been in the everyday lineup, but he was so hot. Joe Torre was going to play him. Aaron Boone in the postseason in 2003, when he hit the walk-off home run against the Boston Red Sox, he got into a terrible slump. And after he hit that walk-off home run, he wound up being benched during the World Series. That's how managers think. So if Alex Verdugo, let's just say for argument's sake, you and I are talking on Wednesday morning. If he threw out 3 hits on Wednesday night, he's going to play. Yeah. If Dominguez has a good game, if he plays well, he's going to play. I think that's how managers think. All the loyalty goes out the window, and I think that's appropriate. I think most players understand that.
Yeah, and going back to your example, 98, they actually removed Shane Spencer for Ricky Leday against Kevin Brown. Do you remember that?
Right.
And Leday ended up hitting, I think, 625 in the World Series. And then, Enrique Wilson was in there, instead of Aaron Boone against Pedro. So, yeah, I agree with you that it's going to come down to the manager's decision. Dominguez, he's had a couple of nice swings here recently. He had a couple of home runs on the West Coast trip. I think a lot of fans kind of just want to see what he can do, given some extended playing time. So it'd be interesting to see who gets the bulk of the at-bats as we go down the stretch here. Let's talk a little bit about Juan Soto.
And I think that might come down, sorry to interrupt, I think that's going to come down to quality of at-bats.
Oh, yeah.
We've seen stretches during the course of the year when Verdugo just looked lost, where Alex looks like he's beating up on himself. And the Yankees aren't going to stand by and just watch that happen and keep running him out there in the way that they did during the regular season and giving him time to figure that out. If he's not playing well and they're in a short series, they're going to get him out of there.
In his last 15 plate appearances, he's made 17 outs because he's got a couple of double plays there. So right. he is struggling right now. But the question on everybody's mind, and we can spend a little bit of time on this one, is Juan Soto. We're about 6 weeks out from free agency. I saw your comments on the Michael Kay show where you just weren't entirely sure that he would re-sign with the Yankees. The Mets are obviously going to be a factor. I don't know if we've ever seen a bidding war. I've been racking my brain between the Yankees and the Mets for a player. Have you ever seen one over the course of the years? I can't think of one.
Not head to head. Now, I remember writing early in the last offseason that we knew that the Mets wanted to go after Yamamoto, and we knew the Yankees wanted to go after Yamamoto, but there were other teams involved heavily, right? The Dodgers wound up winning the bidding for him. The Giants were involved. This will be the first time these two teams go toe-to-toe. It did feel like in the first years of Steve Cohen's ownership, maybe because the concerns of other owners that he was going to go absolutely nutty, it felt like that he continued to sort of veer around the players the Yankees wanted. And to your point, when Mike Mussina was a free agent after the 2000 season, the Mets got involved. But Mussina told me early in the process, he said, look, no matter what happens, just know this, I'm going to sign with the Yankees. He played the process, but in the end, the Yankees were the team that were going to land him. But they don't go head-to-head. The Wilpons seem to always veer around any head-to-head thing with George Steinbrenner. That's not going to be the case here. I was told in spring training, that's our guy. Like Soto is the focus on what the Mets are going to try to do. The Yankees obviously love him. I think they're going to make him a great offer. And as we sit here today and try to assess all this, all we can do is look at the player's history. He got a huge offer, as you know, from the Washington Nationals to stay there. He turned it down. He was looking for something better. The Yankees, in their handling of Aaron Judge, they wanted the player, but they actually wound up being outbid by the San Diego Padres. And in the 24th hour, Hal Steinbrenner steps up. He gives them that ninth year and the $360 million, and they win. Well, in this case, it might be that unlike Aaron Judge, who didn't take the highest offer, Juan Soto might. Like a lot of other clients of Scott Boras, they often take the most dollars. That's what happened with Alex Rodriguez when he went from Seattle to the Texas Rangers in the winter of 2000, $252 million. And so that's what Michael and I were talking about last week. As we sit here, we don't know really what's in Soto's heart. Does he really want to stay with the Yankees, all things being equal? Or like a lot of players, and by the way, this is totally their prerogative, some players equate money for respect. Is Soto looking to get a record number of dollars from one of these teams? And I do think in the end, the Yankees are going to be outbid by somebody. I can't see Hal going to nutty numbers. And we don't know if Steve Cohen is going to do like he does with some of his art and just blow the competition out of the water and say, and I'm just making up the numbers. Let's say the Yankees offered $500 million. Is Steve Cohen going to say, you know what? I want the player. If it's going to cost me $600 million, I'll do it. What's Soto's reaction going to be at that point? If I'm sitting here and guessing, knowing the history of Scott Boras clients, I think the safe money at this point, not the safe money, but I think probably the betting line for me would be he's going to wind up with the Mets.
Yeah, and I think about
does that make sense to you?
It does, and I think about this other factor too is he goes to the Mets, he becomes the guy, right? Aaron Judge is gonna be the guy with the Yankees, right? And Soto would be the guy with the Mets. There's got to be some kind of, I don't know, pride involved in that, in not wanting to be second fiddle on your own team in terms of star power. But I think about.
I would say this though, if you don't mind. I really feel like that Soto and Judge they have worked it out. In San Diego, there was clearly a lot of stuff going on between Soto and Manny Machado, maybe other guys in the clubhouse about who, was the biggest guy in the room. With the Yankees, that doesn't seem to be the case. It seems like that they've carved out some space for each other. And I'll never, and I mentioned Alex Rodriguez's free agency. When he came to Sunday Night Baseball, I talked to Alex and I told him that one of the saddest things that I can remember seeing in the time that I've covered baseball was about a couple of weeks after he signed that deal with the Rangers. He did an interview with the New York Post in which he said, all things being equal, I would have rather signed with the Mets. And once I became his colleague on Sunday Night Baseball, I said, Alex, that's ridiculous. Like, you should have gone where you wanted to play. Mm-hmm. If you had gone to the Mets and said, look, let's work it out, and $200 million, you might not have gotten $252, but you would have gotten a lot of money and you would have been really happy. And maybe in Juan Soto's heart, he loves playing alongside Aaron Judge. We don't know that.
Yeah.
And it was probably smart business for him not to tell us exactly what he's feeling as he heads into free agency.
Aaron Judge was, he played his free agency pretty close to the vest, too. We had that staged thing in San Francisco. And I think he always wanted to be a Yankee, too. I think about this dynamic. And Aaron Judge doesn't seem like a guy who craves attention, right? I mean, he's always gotten the attention because he's probably always been the biggest guy in the room and the best player on the team on whatever sport he's played. And he's just been bigger than life. And you wonder if, having Soto there, he kind of looks at that as kind of a relief, like, hey, somebody else to maybe share the spotlight with. There's a lot of factors that play into this. And I think it's going to be extremely interesting to see where he ends up. I saw David Samson give an interview last week. I think it was with Rich Eisen, where he said that the Yankees might not even be able to afford to go where the Mets can go because they might not really be as profitable as people think. They got the regional sports network that, regional sports networks are not doing great right now. I don't know how Yes is doing financially, but, and Hal doesn't tend to just blow everyone away financially the way that Cohen does. So, it's just going to be a really interesting offseason to stay.
And I want to point this out, about what David Sampson said, the Yankees might not be able to afford him. Of course they can. Right? The San Diego Padres have demonstrated that with how they've handled business. They spent all this money on guys like Manny Machado and the other players, and maybe they weren't making a profit year to year with their business, but the value of that franchise has risen so dramatically because they're filling the ballpark every night. And so in the end, the Padres could certainly afford it. And the Yankees, the most recognizable franchise in the world, can certainly afford to pay whatever they would need to pay to keep Soto. Now, if Hal wants to, go year to year making a profit, it would cut into that. There's no question about it. And you were talking about Aaron Judge. I really feel like in an era in which baseball generally has a leadership void, Aaron Judge is one of the true leaders. Like, I think he's really good at being a teammate and allowing them the space. It doesn't seem like he's jealous at all of how great Soto is. He praises him, he honors him, and there's not this back and forth around the edge. And so I think that's one thing from the Yankees' perspective. You don't have to worry about, oh boy, if we give Soto a lot of money, how is that going to affect Judge's attitude? It won't. He'll be great about it if they re-sign him.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Hey guys, back with more from Buster in just a second, but first, a quick word from our sponsor of this episode.
We're busy. You're busy. And figuring out food all the time is a hassle, especially when you're trying to eat right. Fuel up with Factor's no prep, no mess meals.
Meet your wellness goals thanks to the menu of chef-created meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor features fresh, never frozen meals, dietitian approved, and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great-tasting meals.
Treat yourself to restaurant-quality meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, and salmon. With 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week, you'll always have new flavors to explore.
Head to factormeals.com/FAL50 and use code FAL50 to get 50% off your first box, plus 20% off your next month. That's code FAL50 at factormeals.com/FAL50 to get 50% off your first box, plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active.
Let's move on to the rookies, because we got some Rookie of the Year candidates here on the Yankees this year. Obviously, Austin Wells and Luis Gil both having fantastic years. We saw Colton Cowser last night with an absolute Titanic of a blast into the bleachers. He's got 23 home runs for the Orioles. Wilyer Abreu's had a good year. How do you see the Rookie of the Year voting shake out as somebody who's been involved with voting throughout the years? Are these guys going to steal votes from each other? Is there one favorite that you would put above everyone else?
So I think your point is dead on about the Yankees splitting votes. I think there'll be some writers, who look at the two Yankee candidates and they'll put one of them second or first and third. Maybe put Cowser second. And I think in the end, Cowser's going to wind up winning, which is so different than any of the other major awards, which feel like we're headed toward a unanimous selection, right?
Right.
National League MVP, American League MVP, the Cy Young Awards, they're all going to be unanimous. The National League Rookie of the Year is going to be interesting with Skeens and Jackson Merrill, the Padres, but the American League MVP is not nearly as obvious. And so I think you can find logic strains with each of these three candidates, which is why your point is the most relevant one, that I think the two Yankees are going to pull support from each other. Because you can make a great case with Heel and how he really stepped into the rotation early in the year when Cole went down and how important that was. You can make a case for Wells, a catcher, stepping in for a period of time when people were pitching around Aaron Judge and making opponents pay by doing more and more damage. Now, as you know, he's kind of slid a little bit as we gotten toward the end of the season, but the Yankees have been incredibly impressed with his growth during the course of the year. And Cowser, I think, has had a terrific season overall. I think Cowser's going to win it, and the two Yankees finish second and third.
I'm sure a lot of Yankees fans are going to be disappointed to hear that. I know that a lot of fans want Wells to win it because the Yankees would get that PPI pick, whereas that's not the case for Luis Heel. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out. But it's good to have some youth that will hopefully help the Yankees grow in years to come. All right, final question here before we let you go. You mentioned how good Houston is. The Yankees have obviously handled them pretty well this year, but I still feel like there's this dark spot inside of me that I don't want to go to, where I still feel like the road to the World Series goes through Houston. Do you agree?
I completely agree with you. And look, those teams that I covered with the Yankees from 98 to 2001, what happened consistently with that group is we got through, 99 and 2000, 2001. The regular season got long for that group of players. They began to get more and more tired, almost bored at times of the regular season. But once the postseason hit, O'Neill and Scott Brosius and the pitchers, all of a sudden they would elevate their game. There's no better example of that than 2001 when they were on paper, it felt like the worst team of the American League playoff teams, and they wound up playing to Game 7 of the World Series. They find a way. This Houston team is the exact same way. All of that experience, guys like Bregman and Altuve, they're not going to panic. When they got off to a terrible start of 7-19, I think the numbers were, beginning of the year. And I talked to some of those guys. They're like, yeah, we'll figure it out. And they eventually did. Their heart rates are going to be at 60 once we get into the postseason. And they're going to assume, as those Yankees teams did in the late 90s, that they're going to figure it out. And let's face it, time and time again over the last 8 years, we've seen the Astros be the nemesis for the Yankees in the postseason. I agree with you. I think the Yankees, if they're going to win the World Series, then that path is going to go through Houston at some point.
Yeah, I agree with you, Buster. Buster Olney with ESPN, obviously one of the all-time Yankees reporters. Once again, get his book. It's still available on Amazon. We get it in front of the camera here. The Last Night of the Yankee Dynasty. I read this every year with Joel Sherman's book, Birth of a Dynasty, and then the Verducci and Joe Torre book, The Yankee Years, is kind of a trilogy, and it's a nice little winter, dive back into baseball, into the good old years. But Buster, thank you so much for taking your time today, and I wish you luck the rest of the season.
Yeah, have fun in the postseason. It's going to be absolutely wild.
Appreciate it. See you guys later. As always, like and subscribe, and check us out on all your favorite podcast platforms. We'll see you next time.
Ball game over.
If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like and give us a subscribe. It helps other Yankees fans find the channel. We're also on all your favorite podcast platforms and social media. Join the community, have some fun. We're here after every game. This is Pinstripe Territory.